My uncle told everyone his nephew was faking drowning at his company pool party for attention, then physically blocked 32 people from rescuing the boy while his boss watched. I was at Uncle Rick's company pool party when I saw my older cousin fall off the pool floaty. "Liam's drowning!" I screamed from across the yard. Uncle Rick was sweet talking to his manager and 3 executives from corporate. He barely glanced over. "That kid's been pretending to drown all summer for attention. Liam, stop showing off!" Liam's head went under again. I counted. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. My Aunt Linda started toward the pool, but Uncle Rick grabbed her wrist. "Don't you dare embarrass me! He pulled this same stunt at the country club last week." "Rick, I don't think you want me to lose this promotion. Sit down." The blood was spreading in the pool like red smoke. I ran to the pool edge, but stopped. I couldn't swim. Mom could never afford lessons. My friend Mark whispered, "We should do something." That's when Leah, who was 13 and on the swim team, kicked off her flip-flops, but her mom grabbed her arm so hard it left bruises. "Don't even think about it." "But he's drowning." Uncle Rick said he's fine. "We can't afford to upset him. He owns Daddy's restaurant building." I watched Liam's movements get weaker. His arms weren't thrashing anymore, just these small, desperate pawing motions. I knew from school that it was the worst sign. Silent drowning. Liam went under for 10 seconds, 15, 20. Mrs. Pidge, whose husband worked for Uncle Rick's bank, actually stepped in front of the pool ladder, creating a human shield. "Stay back! You heard Mr. Rick!" Even the teenagers were frozen. Hugo had his phone out, but his dad knocked it into the water. "Don't you dare record this! Rick's lawyers will destroy us!" Liam surfaced again, weaker now. His face was white except for the blood. "Please!" I begged the adults. "He's my best friend." Mr. Hiffner, who ran the corner store, looked torn. "Maybe we should—" "Hiffner." Uncle Rick's voice was ice. "Didn't I just approve your business loan? Shame if I had to reconsider." Liam had been struggling for almost a minute now. Brain damage starts at 160 seconds. Death at 4 minutes. My mom was screaming at Uncle Rick. Other kids were crying. But Uncle Rick had positioned himself like a bouncer, arms crossed, blocking the pool gate. "Everyone calm down!" His dad probably told him to do this. Ruin my party and make me look bad. Almost 2 minutes underwater. Liam wasn't moving at all now. Just floating there, face down, arms spread like a starfish. "Move!" Sarah tried to push past her dad. He shoved her back so hard she fell. "You're grounded, both of you! This manipulation stops now!" That's when I knew. If I didn't do something right now, Liam would die. And Uncle Rick would let it happen, just to save face in front of his boss. 2 minutes, 10 seconds. I sprinted to the fence. Uncle Rick screamed behind me. "Get back here! You're banned from my house! Your whole family is dead to me!" I hauled myself over the 6-foot fence, feeling the wood splinters dig into my palms. Crash! I landed into Mrs. Hiffner's garden on the other side. "Help! Call 911! Kid drowning! 497 Terrace Lane!" Mr. Hiffner was already running with me. His son, a paramedic, grabbed his medical kit. We vaulted back over the fence together. Uncle Rick tried to block us. "This is private property! You can't—" Mr. Hiffner's son shoved him aside like he was nothing. Dove straight in, clothes and all. 2 minutes, 55 seconds. Liam's lips were blue. His little body completely limp as Mr. Hiffner's son pulled him onto the pool deck. No breathing, no pulse. "Everyone back!" Mrs. Hiffner was on the phone with 911, giving instructions. Uncle Rick was still yelling about trespassing. His party ruined, threatening lawsuits. Then Liam coughed. Water poured from his mouth. The most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. Him crying. He was alive. But our celebration was short-lived. The hospital said he'd been without oxygen for nearly 3 minutes. He had water in his lungs that would cause breathing problems for life. Uncle Rick's boss fired him on the spot. "Any man who'd let a child die to impress me is no man I want in my company." The police took everyone's statements. 32 witnesses saw Uncle Rick physically prevent people from saving Liam. Security cameras from 3 different yards caught everything. I was at my aunt's house 3 weeks later when they broke the news. The water in Liam's lungs had caused an infection. His weakened body couldn't fight it. He died alone in the ICU while we were all at home, thinking he was getting better. But that wasn't even the worst part. Uncle Rick pulled enough strings that his lawyer successfully argued it was a tragic misunderstanding. All the adults who'd blocked us from saving Liam lied. Said Uncle Rick was just being a concerned parent who thought Liam was playing. When the adults had left us, I said what we were all thinking. They killed him. Every adult at that party who stopped us from saving my brother is a murderer. They thought we were just kids, but they had no idea what was coming. That night, after the adults finally let us go home, my phone started buzzing with messages from Mark and Hugo and Sarah and all the other kids who'd been at the party. None of us could sleep. Mark had already started a group chat called What Really Happened and was typing out everything he remembered with exact times. Hugo was listing every single adult who'd blocked someone from helping, their names burning into my memory like a brand. Sarah confirmed which executives from Uncle Rick's company had been there, the ones he'd been trying so hard to impress while Liam drowned. My hands were still shaking as I typed out what I'd seen from my angle across the yard. We all knew the adults would try to make us forget or twist what happened into something else. The next morning, Mom woke me up early looking worried. Uncle Rick had called a family meeting at his house, but made it clear only adults were invited. She left me with cereal and cartoons, but I could tell something was wrong. When she came back 2 hours later, her face was pale, and she wouldn't look me in the eye. She sat down at the kitchen table and told me Uncle Rick's lawyer had been at the meeting. The lawyer made it very clear that anyone spreading lies about what happened could face defamation lawsuits that would destroy us financially. Mom's voice cracked when she said we couldn't afford to fight Uncle Rick in court. She made me promise not to talk to anyone about the party. Monday came too fast, and sitting in class felt wrong when Liam should have been 3 desks over. I kept staring at nothing, seeing his face turning blue over and over in my mind. Our counselor, Ms. McAllister, noticed and pulled me aside after second period. She had kind eyes and asked if I wanted to talk about what was bothering me. I wanted to tell her everything, wanted to scream about what they'd done, but Mom's warning echoed in my head. Instead, I just mumbled something about having nightmares about swimming pools. Ms. McAllister gave me her card and said I could talk to her anytime. That afternoon, Hugo texted us all to meet at the park after school. He pulled out his phone phone and showed us something that made my stomach flip. His neighbor had security cameras that faced Uncle Rick's backyard and had shared the footage with Hugo's family. You could see everything crystal clear. Hugo's dad knocking the phone into the water. Mrs. Pidge physically blocking the pool ladder with her body. Uncle Rick shoving people back. Hugo had already made 3 copies on different USB drives and hid them in different places. One in his locker at the school, one buried in a waterproof bag in his backyard, one at his cousin's house 2 towns over. This was our insurance policy if the adults tried to change the story. 2 weeks after Liam died, I was doing homework when the phone rang. Mom was in the shower, so I answered it. The voice on the other end said they were a reporter from the local paper asking about the incident at the pool party. My heart started racing, but before I could say anything, Mom came running out dripping wet and grabbed the phone from me. She hung up immediately and told me never to answer calls from numbers we didn't know, but I'd already memorized the reporter's name from their introduction. Later that night, I looked them up online and found they'd written several articles about Uncle Rick's business dealings before, investigating shady loans and property deals. Leah texted our group chat in a panic the next day, saying her mom had found out about our messages. Her mom had gone through her phone and forced her to delete everything right in front of her. But Leah was smart and had already backed everything up to the cloud using her school email account her mom didn't know about. When Leah came to the school the next day, she pulled up her sleeve to show me something that made me sick. The bruises from where her mom had grabbed her at the pool were still there, purple and green marks shaped like fingers. She'd been taking photos of them every day with time stamps, documenting how they changed color as they healed. She said they hurt every time she moved her arm. A few days later, I got a private message on Instagram from an account I didn't recognize. It was Mr. Hiffner's son, the paramedic who'd pulled Liam from the pool. He said he was willing to testify about what he saw as a medical professional, how Liam showed every sign of real drowning and not fake attention-seeking. But he warned me that Uncle Rick was already pressuring his father about their store's business loan, threatening to call it in early if they caused trouble. We agreed to stay in touch through a secure messaging app that deleted messages after reading. Liam's memorial service was held at the big church downtown 3 weeks after he died. Uncle Rick stood at the podium in an expensive black suit, giving a speech about water safety and the importance of teaching kids not to cry wolf. I wonder what Uncle Rick's boss was really thinking while watching this chaos unfold. Did he truly not notice something was terribly wrong, or was he choosing to look away? He announced he was donating $10,000 to the local swim center in Liam's memory. I watched Sarah's face turn red as her father talked about responsibility and safety while standing over her cousin's closed casket. She couldn't take it anymore. Sarah stood up in the middle of his speech and walked out, her heels clicking on the church floor as everyone turned to stare. Uncle Rick's face went red, but he kept talking, his voice getting louder as he watched his own daughter leave. The next week, Mom got a call from the district attorney's office, officially declining to press criminal charges against anyone from the party. They cited insufficient evidence of criminal intent, saying it appeared to be a tragic misunderstanding. But when Mom hung up and went to the bathroom, the phone rang again. The same secretary whispered quickly that we should keep those videos safe, and that sometimes civil cases succeed where criminal ones don't. She hung up before I could respond, but I understood what she was trying to tell us. One afternoon, when Uncle Rick was at work, Aunt Linda called and asked if I could come over. She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks, and the house felt empty without Liam's laughter. She took me to the living room and asked me to tell her exactly what I saw that day. Her hands shook as I described Liam's face turning blue and how he'd stopped moving at the end. When I told her about Uncle Rick blocking people from helping, she started crying so hard she couldn't breathe. She admitted she'd suspected Rick was lying about the attention-seeking, but had been too scared to challenge him. She said she'd been sleeping in the guest room since the funeral and could barely look at him anymore. 2 days after that visit with Aunt Linda, I was back at the school trying to focus on math when the counselor pulled me out of class. She'd set up chairs in a circle in her office, and there were already 4 other kids waiting. Mark was there, even though his parents had forbidden him from talking to me. Hugo sat next to him with dark circles under his eyes. Leah picked at the fading bruises on her arm, while Sarah stared at the floor. The counselor closed the door and sat down with us. She said she knew we'd all been at the pool party and wanted to help us process what happened. She couldn't ask directly about the incident, but she started teaching us about trauma and how our brains respond to scary situations. She showed us how to write down what we remembered with dates and times, and told us to keep copies in safe places. She explained how important it was to tell the truth, even when adults pressure us not to. Mark kept looking at the door like his parents might burst in any second. After the session ended, Mark whispered that his parents had told him our family was stirring up trouble and banned him from seeing me. But he said he'd been secretly uploading all the photos from the party to an encrypted cloud service his parents didn't know about. He had timestamps on everything showing exactly when things happened. We agreed to meet at the library after school, where his parents wouldn't find us. 3 weeks into September, I was walking to the school when I saw it. Someone had spray-painted "Child Killer" in huge red letters across Uncle Rick's company building. The paint was still dripping when I passed by. Police cars were already there taking pictures, but the security cameras had somehow stopped working that night. Uncle Rick was screaming at the security guards while workers tried to scrub off the paint. By lunch, everyone at the school had seen the photos online. Uncle Rick hired 2 private security guards to patrol his building at night and installed new cameras everywhere. But the damage was done, and people were starting to whisper about what really happened at the pool. The counselor called me to her office again that week and handed me a business card. She said it was for someone who might help me talk about grief and healing. On the back was a private email address written in pencil. I recognized the reporter's name from when they'd called our house. I went to the library computer lab and created a new email account. I attached just one photo from the party showing the pool with the timestamp clearly visible at the bottom. I didn't write anything else, just sent the photo and logged out. The next Monday, Hugo came to the school with red eyes. His dad had lost his job at the company where Uncle Rick had connections. They said it was restructuring, but everyone knew the real reason. But Hugo said his dad wasn't backing down. He'd started calling other parents who were at the party, asking them what they really saw. Some hung up on him, but others started talking. The wall of silence was cracking. I started having these attacks where I couldn't breathe whenever I heard water running. The shower made me panic. Mom would find me curled up on the bathroom floor gasping for air. She finally agreed to let me see a therapist, even though we could barely afford it. The therapist specialized in trauma, and after our third session, she got very serious. She said she was required by law to report suspected child endangerment. She'd already started filing paperwork about the pool party based on what I'd told her. 2 days later, 12 families got letters from Uncle Rick's lawyer. The letters warned them about spreading malicious rumors and threatened legal action. But instead of scaring people, it made them angry. Parents who hadn't even known the full story started calling each other asking what was going on. The lawyer's aggressive tactics made Uncle Rick look like he had something to hide. More people started questioning his version of events. Then Leah's mom showed up at our door crying. She said Uncle Rick was threatening to evict them from the commercial property where her husband ran his restaurant. She begged Mom to make me stop causing trouble. She said they'd lose everything if Uncle Rick followed through. Mom's face went hard, and she told her to leave. As she walked away, I heard Mom say that her husband chose property over her nephew's life. The reporter's article came out that Friday. It was carefully written with lots of alleged and reportedly, but it laid out the basic timeline. The most damaging part was one simple fact that nobody could dispute. Emergency services weren't called for nearly 3 minutes after Liam went under. The online comments exploded with people doing the math about brain damage and oxygen deprivation. People were furious that adults had stood by while a child drowned. Uncle Rick's lawyer sent threatening letters to the newspaper, but they just published those too. Meanwhile, the counselor helped us create a memorial webpage for Liam. We posted photos of him smiling and laughing from before the party. Within 3 days, it had hundreds of posts. Kids from the school wrote about times Liam had shared his lunch or helped them with homework. But the most powerful posts came from children who'd been at the party describing how adults had physically stopped them from helping. One girl wrote about how her mom held her back while she screamed. Another kid described his dad knocking his phone away when he tried to call for help. The truth was spreading faster than Uncle Rick's lawyers could contain it, and more people were finding the courage to speak up. That same night, Hugo texted our group chat with a link to something called Murder at the Pool Party podcast. My hands shook as I clicked play. The host was describing everything that happened at Uncle Rick's party in detail. She had the security footage somehow and was playing the audio of Uncle Rick screaming at everyone. Within hours, the episode had thousands of downloads. Uncle Rick's lawyer sent them a takedown notice, but it was too late. People had already saved copies and were sharing them everywhere. The podcast host said she got the footage from an anonymous source who wanted justice for Liam. Comments were pouring in from people all over calling Uncle Rick a monster. 3 days later, I was at Mom's friend's house when Sarah called me crying. Her mom had just packed up their stuff and left Uncle Rick. Aunt Linda had filed for separation papers that morning. Uncle Rick tried to tell everyone she was having a breakdown from grief, but Linda's lawyer had been taking notes for weeks. She had recordings of Uncle Rick threatening people at the party. She had copies of his angry texts. She moved in with her sister 2 towns over and took Sarah with her. Uncle Rick showed up at their new place screaming, but Linda's sister called the cops, and he had to leave. The next week, a woman in a gray suit showed up at our door. She said her name was Tess Say from Child Protective Services. She needed to interview me about the pool party. Mom tried to say I wasn't home, but Ms. C said she'd wait. She interviewed me for 2 hours asking about every single adult who was there. She wanted to know who stopped which kid from helping. She wrote down every name. She said all 32 families would be getting visits. Parents started calling each other in panic. Some tried to get their stories straight, but Ms. Say was too smart for that. She interviewed the kids at the school where parents couldn't coach them. Then Mr. Hiffner's son did something brave. He went on the local news and explained exactly what drowning looks like. He used medical terms to show how Liam wasn't faking. He said any adult should have recognized the signs. He said Uncle Rick's claim about fake drowning was medically impossible. The news anchor asked him directly if he thought it was murder. He paused and said it was criminal negligence at minimum. Uncle Rick called Mr. Hiffner that night and said his store lease was terminated. Mr. Hiffner had to close his business the next week, but that just made more people angry. Our group of kids started meeting after school at the library. More kids whose parents were at the party joined us. Rick's sudden donation to the swim center while standing at Liam's casket seems like such a calculated move. What kind of person uses their nephew's funeral to look generous? We started making a chart of all the ways Uncle Rick controlled people in town. Hugo was really good with computers and made it into a graphic. It showed Uncle Rick at the center like a spider with lines going out to every business and family he controlled. Property leases, business loans, job connections, everything. Hugo posted it on social media with the hashtag Justice for Liam. It went viral overnight. Thousands of people shared it. News stations started calling. That's when the state attorney general got involved. A detective named Bram McElroy showed up at the school. He wasn't like the local cops who knew Uncle Rick. He interviewed each of us kids separately in the principal's office. He asked for our USB drives with the footage. He put them in evidence bags and gave us receipts. He promised to keep them safe. He said this case was bigger than just our town now. Uncle Rick must have been getting desperate because he made a huge mistake. He showed up at the school and asked to speak with Ms. McAllister privately. She was smart, though. She turned on her phone recorder before he came in. He offered her money to transfer me to another school district. He said I was causing problems and needed to be removed. He said he'd donate $50,000 to the school if she made it happen. Ms. McAllister kept calm and got him to repeat the offer twice. Then she reported it immediately to the police. Attempting to bribe a school official was a federal crime. Detective McElroy arrested Uncle Rick that afternoon at his office. Then more footage showed up. A family 2 doors down had a security camera that caught everything from a different angle. You could see Uncle Rick pushing parents back from the pool. You could see him creating a wall of people while Liam struggled in the water. The timestamp showed it went on for almost 3 minutes. His lawyer's whole story about misunderstanding fell apart. There was no way to explain away what the video showed. Sarah had to testify at a closed hearing the next month. She was so scared, but she did it anyway. She told the judge that when she tried to run to help Liam, her dad had said to let the brat drown. She'd been carrying that secret for months. She said her dad cared more about his promotion than his nephew's life. The prosecutor said Sarah was the bravest witness she'd ever seen. Uncle Rick's own daughter had turned against him. That's when the FBI showed up. They'd been tracking Uncle Rick's money and found something big. Right after Liam died, Uncle Rick had moved millions of dollars to offshore accounts. He'd been planning to run if things went bad. Federal agents raided his house and office. They took his computers and boxes of files. They froze all his bank accounts. What started as a drowning was now a federal financial crimes case, too. The next week, Mrs. Pidge showed up at our door crying so hard she could barely talk. She told my mom that Uncle Rick had promised to forgive her husband's $30,000 business loan if she helped keep order at the pool party. She said she'd been sick about it ever since and wanted to testify against him. The prosecutor gave her immunity in exchange for her testimony, and suddenly other adults started coming forward too. Mr. Hiffner admitted Uncle Rick threatened his store lease. The parents who grabbed their kids confessed about the debts and jobs Uncle Rick held over them. One by one, the whole truth about that day was coming out. Local businesses started cutting ties with Uncle Rick's company real fast. The hardware store took down his company's promotional signs. The grocery chain ended their corporate account. The country club sent him a letter revoking his membership effective immediately. His old bosses at corporate released a statement saying they'd fired him the day of the party and wanted nothing to do with him. Every day, another piece of his empire fell apart. 3 TV news vans were parked outside his office building filming as more companies pulled out. Aunt Linda's lawyer called us to say she was filing a wrongful death civil suit against Uncle Rick and every adult who blocked the rescue. The lawyer was working for free because he said the case made him so angry he couldn't sleep at night. He wanted damages that would take everything Uncle Rick owned and give it to the families he'd controlled for years. The lawsuit named 12 adults as defendants. 2 months after we gave our statements to Detective McElroy, the grand jury finally made their decision. Uncle Rick got indicted for involuntary manslaughter and child endangerment. 12 other adults got charged as accessories. The courtroom was packed when they all showed up for arraignment. I sat in the gallery with the other kids from the party. Not one of those adults could look at us. They all stared at their shoes while the judge read the charges. Uncle Rick's face was red and sweaty. His expensive suit couldn't hide how scared he was now. Ms. McAllister started a swim safety program at the community center in Liam's honor. She taught kids how to recognize real drowning, not the fake splashing you see in movies. She showed them how silent it really is. She made sure to include a whole section on speaking up when adults fail to act. The program got so popular that 3 school districts made it mandatory. Every kid who went through it learned Liam's story. The judge froze all of Uncle Rick's assets while they investigated his finances. That meant he couldn't pay his fancy legal team anymore. His main lawyer dropped him immediately and then sued him for $200,000 in unpaid bills. Uncle Rick had to get a public defender instead. Watching him lose the protection his money had always bought him felt like the first real justice we'd seen. Hugo's dad filed a wrongful termination lawsuit since Uncle Rick got him fired through his connections. The judge ruled in their favor and awarded them a huge settlement. Hugo's dad used that money to start his own business where he didn't have to answer to anybody. Other families started filing similar lawsuits. The plumber who Uncle Rick blackballed won his case. The accountant he got fired won too. Every week brought new lawsuits and Uncle Rick couldn't afford to fight them all. The trial date got set for 6 months after Liam died. We spent those months getting ready. The prosecutor met with us every week to go over our testimony. Ms. McAllister made sure we all had therapists to help us deal with what we'd seen. She set up group sessions where we could support each other. Some days were really hard, especially when we had to watch the videos again, but we knew we had to be strong for Liam. A documentary filmmaker contacted Aunt Linda about making a film about what happened. We all met with him and agreed to participate, but only if Aunt Linda approved everything, and all the money went to water safety programs. The filmmaker spent weeks interviewing us. He was gentle with us kids, letting us take breaks when we needed them. He said Liam's story could save other kids' lives by showing how money and power can enable terrible crimes. 2 weeks before the trial, Uncle Rick's lawyer tried to make a deal. He offered to plead guilty to lesser charges if they dropped the manslaughter. The prosecutor, Ms. Vicky Ridley, turned it down flat. She told us the community needed a full trial. People needed to hear the truth spoken under oath in open court. She said justice for Liam meant full accountability, not some backroom deal. Uncle Rick was going to have to face what he'd done in front of everyone. The pre-trial hearings started 2 weeks later, and that's when everything really started falling apart for Uncle Rick. The prosecutor had boxes and boxes of financial records that showed Uncle Rick wasn't just a bad uncle. He was running his whole business like some kind of mob boss. The IRS agent sat in the gallery every single day, taking notes while they showed how Uncle Rick had been hiding money in fake companies and not paying taxes for years. He'd been charging people crazy interest on loans that weren't even legal. One guy owed him $50,000 on a loan that started at $10,000 just 3 years ago. The prosecutor kept pulling out more papers, showing how Uncle Rick threatened to call in loans if people didn't do what he wanted. More parents started coming to the courthouse to talk to the prosecutor during breaks. Mr. Edmund Graves, who ran the hardware store down on Main Street, finally told the truth about that day at the pool. He said Uncle Rick had called him the morning of the party to remind him about his business loan and how it could be called in any time. That's why he didn't help Liam, even though he wanted to. 3 other parents said the same thing happened to them. The prosecutor added more charges every time someone new came forward. When the actual trial started, they wheeled in 5 huge TV screens and set them up so everyone could see. The security footage started playing from all different angles at the same time. You could see everything. Uncle Rick grabbing Aunt Linda's wrist when she tried to help, him pushing people back from the pool, Mrs. Pidge blocking the ladder, while Liam's little arms got weaker and weaker. One of the jurors had to leave the room when they showed the part where Liam went under for the last time. The judge had to call a recess because 2 other jurors were crying. They played that footage 3 times during the trial, and it got worse to watch every time. When it was my turn to testify, my hands were shaking, so bad I could barely hold the water cup they gave me. Uncle Rick's lawyer kept trying to make me look like some confused kid who didn't understand what really happened, but I just kept telling them exactly what I saw. How Uncle Rick said Liam was faking, how he threatened Mr. Hiffner about his loan, how he shoved Sarah when she tried to help her own cousin. I talked talked for 3 whole hours and answered every single question they asked. When I finally got to step down, I saw Aunt Linda in the gallery, and she mouthed, "Thank you," with tears running down her face. $50,000 to make a kid disappear from school? Rick's bribe to Ms. McAllister makes me wonder if he'd done this before with other people who got in his way. The medical examiner was this older lady who'd been doing her job for 30 years, and she didn't mess around. She had charts and pictures showing exactly what happens to a brain when it doesn't get oxygen for 3 minutes. She explained how that damage made Liam's body too weak to fight the infection that killed him 3 weeks later. She said if Liam had been pulled out even 30 seconds earlier, he'd probably still be alive. Uncle Rick's lawyer tried to say the infection could have happened anyway, but she shut him down with medical studies and statistics. She looked right at the jury and said those 3 minutes of drowning directly caused Liam's death. On the 4th day of the trial, Uncle Rick took the stand and tried to convince everyone he really thought Liam was playing around. But when the prosecutor started asking questions, his story fell apart fast. He couldn't explain why he'd never seen Liam fake drowning before if it happened all the time like he claimed. He couldn't explain why he physically stopped his own wife from checking on their nephew. He said he didn't remember saying half the things that 32 witnesses heard him say. The prosecutor played the security footage while Uncle Rick was on the stand and made him watch himself blocking the pool gate while Liam drowned. Uncle Rick's face got redder and redder, but he kept lying, saying he was just trying to keep everyone calm and safe. The prosecutor asked him if keeping his promotion was worth his nephew's life, and Uncle Rick actually said he objected to the question. The judge told him he wasn't a lawyer and had to answer. He said no, but nobody believed him. The jury only needed 4 hours to decide. They came back with guilty verdicts on everything: involuntary manslaughter, child endangerment, conspiracy, and a bunch of other charges I didn't even understand. Uncle Rick's face went white when they read the first guilty. By the time they got to the 10th guilty verdict, he was slumped in his chair like all the air had been let out of him. The other adults who had been charged got their verdicts too. Most of them guilty of lesser charges, but still guilty. Mrs. Pidge cried when they read hers. 2 weeks later was sentencing day, and Aunt Linda finally got to speak. She stood up there for 20 minutes talking about Liam. Not about the drowning, but about who he was. How he loved dinosaurs and always shared his lunch with kids who forgot theirs. How he wanted to be a marine biologist when he grew up. Then, she talked about choosing to save face over saving her son's life. She said, Uncle Rick killed their child for a promotion he didn't even get. She asked for the maximum sentence and said 15 years wasn't enough for what he took from her. The judge gave Uncle Rick 15 years with no chance of early release for 5 years. Uncle Rick's lawyer asked for minimum security, but the judge said no. The other adults got different sentences. Mrs. Pidge got 300 hours of community service teaching water safety. Some got probation. A couple got a year or 2 in jail. Hugo's dad didn't get charged since he was one of the parents who tried to help and got threatened. After the criminal trial ended, all the civil lawsuits got settled pretty fast. Uncle Rick's lawyers couldn't fight them all, and his money was running out anyway. The court ordered all his assets sold off. His house, his cars, his business, everything. The money got split up between all the families he'd been controlling with his loans and threats. Aunt Linda got the biggest settlement, and she used it to start the Liam Foundation. They give free swim lessons to kids whose families can't afford them, and teach adults how to spot real drowning versus playing around. 3 months after the trial ended, I got called to the principal's office and found the whole school board sitting there with stacks of papers. They wanted me to help write new rules that would force every adult in the school system to act when kids asked for help, no matter what. I spent 6 hours in that room going through every detail of what happened at the pool, marking up their draft policies with a red pen. The superintendent kept wiping his eyes when I explained how adults physically blocked us from saving Liam. They voted that same day to make it mandatory training for every single person who worked with kids, from janitors to coaches to parent volunteers. The documentary crew showed up at my house the next week with cameras and release forms, saying they'd been following our story since the trial. They filmed me walking through the community pool, pointing to where everything happened, my hands shaking when I touched the ladder Mrs. Pidge had blocked. The director had me sit with the other kids from the party while we watched the security footage together for the first time since court. Sarah broke down completely when we saw her dad shove her to the ground. Hugo's hands turned into fists, watching his phone get knocked into the water. They interviewed us for 12 hours over 3 days, getting every single detail about that day and everything that came after. When it aired 6 months later on primetime TV, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from kids all over the country saying the same thing happened to them. The network got so many emails, they did a follow-up special about bystander responsibility that won 3 different awards. Ms. McAllister called me into her office the day after the documentary aired to show me her promotion letter to district crisis counselor. She'd used our case in her application, explaining how she helped 32 traumatized kids process what they witnessed and find ways to speak truth, even when adults tried to silence us. The district gave her funding to create a whole curriculum about recognizing real emergencies and acting despite adult pressure. She traveled to schools across the state, teaching other counselors how to support kids who'd been failed by the adults supposed to protect them. Hugo's family opened their new business downtown, in the building that used to be Uncle Rick's main office before the bank seized it. They turned it into a community market and hired Mr. Hiffner as manager since he'd lost his corner store standing up to Uncle Rick. The grand opening was packed with families who'd been freed from Uncle Rick's control, everyone buying stuff they didn't even need just to support them. They put Liam's picture behind the register with a sign that said, "Courage means doing the right thing even when it costs you everything." The principal asked me to speak at the first school assembly about Liam's law, and my legs were shaking so bad I could barely walk to the microphone. I told 400 kids about watching my best friend drown while adults stopped us from saving him. I explained how to recognize real drowning, how it's silent and fast, not loud and splashing like in movies. After that, other schools started calling, and soon I was speaking twice a month at different schools, always ending with the same message that your voice matters, even when adults tell tell you to be quiet. Kids would come up to me afterward with their own stories about times adults failed them, and we'd exchange phone numbers to stay in touch. Aunt Linda sold the big house she'd shared with Uncle Rick and bought a small 2-bedroom place near the elementary school. Sarah's room was tiny, but she said it felt safer than their old mansion ever did. They went to therapy together twice a week, working through the trauma of being forced to watch Liam die. Sarah started volunteering at the community pool, teaching little kids to swim, turning her guilt into something positive. She'd tell every parent who dropped their kid off about the difference between real drowning and playing, making sure they knew the signs. Ms. Ridley used the momentum from winning our case to push for state legislation that would make preventing rescue attempts a felony. She brought me and the other kids to testify at the state capitol, where we told our story to a room full of lawmakers. The bill passed unanimously after one senator said any adult who'd vote against protecting children shouldn't be in the office. They officially named it Liam's Law and made it a crime to use threats or intimidation to stop someone from helping in an emergency. Our support group that started with just us kids from the pool grew bigger every month. Kids whose parents ignored abuse, who watched siblings get hurt while adults did nothing, who'd been told to keep quiet about things that mattered. We taught them how to document everything with timestamps and backups, how to find mandatory reporters who'd actually report, how to get their stories heard when adults tried to silence them. We created a whole network across 3 states of kids who knew their rights and wouldn't let adults fail them again. Mr. Hiffner's son got a medal from the fire department for his rescue attempt, even though he couldn't save Liam. He quit his paramedic job and started teaching water safety full-time at the community center, offering free lessons to any family that couldn't afford them. Every Saturday morning, the pool was packed with kids learning to swim, and he'd always start by showing them what real drowning looks like. He made sure every single kid in town would know how to save someone, and more importantly, that they should always try even when adults say no. The town council voted to put up a memorial at the community pool, and they asked us kids to help design it. We wanted something that would make people remember that protecting kids matters more than money or reputation or keeping your job. The bronze plaque we designed had Liam's picture at the top, and these words underneath that made Uncle Rick's lawyer try to block it, but the judge said free speech protected our right to remember the truth. Every week for months, thick envelopes showed up at Aunt Linda's house with the prison return address, Uncle Rick's handwriting getting more desperate each time. The medical examiner having 30 years of experience matters here. Rick's lawyer couldn't shake someone with that much knowledge about drowning deaths. Those 3 minutes she kept talking about make me wonder if Rick was counting them while he blocked that gate. She'd grab them with kitchen tongs, drop them straight into a manila folder marked evidence, and mail the whole batch to the prosecutor's office without opening a single one. The prosecutor called once to say the letters contained nothing useful, just pages of him blaming everyone else, and trying to manipulate her into visiting. But Linda had already changed her phone number and moved twice to make sure he couldn't reach her any other way. 2 years after the trial, a woman from the National Child Safety Council called our house asking if our group would speak at their conference in Washington, D.C., and Mom nearly dropped the phone when they said they'd pay for flights and hotels for all 6 of us kids who'd witnessed everything. We practiced our presentation for weeks in Ms. McAllister's classroom, Hugo making slides from the security footage, while Sarah wrote out exactly what each adult had done to stop us from saving Liam. Standing in front of 300 child advocates and lawmakers, my voice shook at first, but got stronger when I saw people crying as we showed the timeline of those 3 minutes. A senator from Texas stood up afterward and said he was drafting federal legislation requiring adults to attempt rescue or face criminal charges, and within 6 months, the Liam Act passed with only 2 votes against it. The same week the law passed, federal agents showed up at Uncle Rick's old office building with warrants and found evidence of offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands containing $14 million he'd hidden from taxes over 20 years. The IRS seized every penny and announced they were using it to fund free swimming programs in 200 cities, with Liam's picture on every pool entrance and his story printed on the back of every swim certificate kids earned. Sarah's graduation came 3 years later, and she stood at the podium in her blue cap and gown, looking out at 800 people, including half the adults who'd stood by that day at the pool. Her voice was steady when she said Liam would have been graduating too if adults had chosen his life over their mortgage payments. And she watched 3 different parents get up and walk out in shame, while the rest gave her the longest standing ovation anyone could remember. Aunt Linda met Arnie Saxton at a grief support group 4 years after Liam died, this quiet man who owned a small hardware store, and treated Sarah like she'd always been his daughter, never trying to replace Uncle Rick, but just being there when they needed someone. He sold his store and used the money to expand the Liam Foundation until they were providing free swim lessons to 8,000 kids across the state, with mobile pools that traveled to neighborhoods where families couldn't afford to get to the community center. Linda wore a simple dress to their small wedding with just family and close friends, and I watched her smile for real for the first time since before the pool party. The acceptance letter from law school came on what would have been Liam's 18th birthday. The scholarship committee writing that my essay about fighting for justice when adults failed had moved them to tears, and they wanted to support someone who understood why prosecutors matter. Mom framed the letter next to Liam's picture on our wall, and I spent the next 3 years studying every case about child endangerment and duty to rescue, preparing to make sure no prosecutor would ever call a preventable death just a tragic misunderstanding again. The 5th anniversary of Liam's death fell on a Saturday, and the whole town showed up at the community pool for the first annual Water Safety Day, with 500 kids getting their first swimming lessons, while every adult had to sign a pledge card promising to act if they ever saw a child in danger. Uncle Rick watched it all from his cell on the 13-inch TV bolted to the wall, the local news showing his old house in the background, while kids learned to swim in the pool where his nephew had drowned, and his cellmate said later that Rick didn't speak for 3 days after seeing it. Our group met up every few months, even as we spread across different colleges and cities, Ms. McAllister becoming a federal advocate for child protection, Hugo going to medical medical school, Mark becoming a teacher, Leah joining the Coast Guard, Sarah getting her law degree, and me working at the district attorney's office. We'd sit around someone's apartment sharing stories about the kids we were helping and the changes we were making, all of us carrying Liam's memory in different ways, but united by that terrible day when we learned what happens when adults choose money over doing what's right. Uncle Rick's last appeal got denied by a judge who wrote that anyone who would watch a child die to protect their reputation deserved every day of their sentence, while the other adults finished their community service teaching water safety and speaking at schools about the cost of staying silent. Every summer, I drive back to teach swimming at the community pool, standing next to the bronze memorial with Liam's face that reminds everyone who walks by that his life mattered more than anyone's job or loan or lease. And I watch kids who remind me of him learning to float and swim and save each other while their parents watch from chairs, knowing now that no amount of money or power is worth a child's life. Well, that's one way to put it. A whole bunch of tidy little endings all stacked together. Funny how that works out sometimes. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.